Question number 1 on webassign. 5.96 moles in 1 liter, so obviously then the molarity is 5.96 molar for your H2 and your I2. So it's asking what would the concentration of this be at equilibrium. Again, you would end up doing your products over reactants equals your K value. And this particular problem for number 1, for the first part at least, you do the square root thing that I mentioned. When you see a 2 coefficient, a lot of times that's going to end up doing this square root thing to undo stuff. This first part isn't the big deal. It's part 2 that's going to be more difficult. And why part 2 is more difficult is it says it's going to remove 5.27 moles. If you have this as your initial amount, I'm sorry, not initial, your equilibrium concentration, subtract this amount to get your new value at some point. So what's weird about question 1 is I ask you to solve, webassign asks you to solve for the HF concentration. You should also know the H2 and the I2 concentration. But then you're going to subtract this from that to get a new initial amount of HF. So you'd have your initial amount of H2 and F2, which is from the previous part. You would then have whatever these two subtracted are from as well, and then you start doing your X-type math. And this one's tricky. Heck, I'm leaving the answers up there so you can kind of check and see what it is when you do this to figure it out. This second problem, this is, again, square root type stuff. I don't think the second problem is overly complicated. Again, number will vary for everybody. The number 1 issue I see with this third problem is remember that equilibrium is the concentration of the products divided by reactants. So when I give you the moles and the liters, make sure you divide those two to get a molarity to start with. Then you can do your equilibrium math from there. Again, this one's going to be a little bit trickier as well. But at the same time, you should be able to, once you know the molarity, solve from there. Finally, number 4. What is the equilibrium concentration of HC if the initial concentration of all species is this? If you're given an amount of everything to start, you got to realize step number 1 is reaction quotient. Figure out the direction of the reaction. Then step 2 can be setting up the ice table minus X plus X is whatever it might be and doing the math that we did. Again, I see a 2HCl there, which tells me that probably at some point I'm going to be able to do a square root to both sides to simplify.